So I'll start off with the first question. They do know what these questions are, by the way. I'm not going to suddenly ask them how they're going to deal with the deficit. What's the view on austerity? I know. Anyway, so I guess I'll start off with you, Seamus. What have been the successes? I spelled that right, I have done, so that seems to be too easy for some reason. What have been the successes in digital curation and preservation? I'm not going to make any apologies for the curation/preservation, and nor are we going to try and define those words. We're just going to have curation/preservation because we would always want to. But what have been the successes? So perhaps, Seamus, you can lead us off with what you see to be the successes.
That's probably the exam question for the end of the year. What's the difference between curation and preservation? Anyway, so I have to think about a lot of different things. I said that in 1990 there was a little box full of material that you could get that had everything that everybody knew about digital preservation at the time. And the interesting thing was in the 1990s, and even with a really important report in 1995 from the Digital Preservation Task Force in the US, the problem was that people didn't know what the problem was. And I think the biggest thing that we've actually done is we've taken the problem and we've segmented it into a lot of different problems. So we have the problem about media obsolescence, we have the problem about software obsolescence, but on the other hand, we have the problems, we understand issues like what is a digital repository and how do you construct a digital repository? How do you build a team of people who are knowledgeable about the range of issues? How do we actually collaborate on digital preservation problems? So what we've done is we've taken a problem, a general question about digital preservation, and we've broken it down into smaller problems that we can actually work on piece by piece. The thing, though, is about digital preservation is that we've also realized that it's not just about preservation in keeping the bits, but it's also about ensuring that the bits are usable. And that's what the curation aspect is, because usability isn't just being able to access them, but it's actually being able to understand them. So it's a combination of the point where you have your pragmatics, you have your syntax, you have your semantics, you can actually understand the objects themselves, you get the meaning out of them, you can reuse them, but you do that through annotating and maintaining them over time. So we've moved the conversation on a little bit. So the next big thing we actually did is raise awareness. And so there are lots and lots more programs that teach about digital preservation and digital curation across the world as a result of that growth. And memory institutions are aware of the problem, and actually governments and funders like the EU have traditionally invested in it, although the EU tends to seem to think now that maybe we've moved beyond a point where their investment is necessary. So we've done some awareness raising. It's also not been quite as successful as we'd like, because we don't have a popular understanding of digital preservation or some of the issues that are involved in that. I think we've done some really good work with modeling and workflow analysis and OIIS, which came out in the end of the 1990s, which came out of the space arena. Although I believe we need a better model, we need one that is more cognizant of the information possibilities across the fuller life cycle. Actually, we got a model in OIS that allows us to communicate. In fact, those of you who are technically bent in this space, and those of you who don't have much technical knowledge, if you understand OIS, you can actually talk to one another, which makes it possible for someone with a very strong archival background, knowledge of OIS, to communicate with a really strong technical person and create a conversation that leads to the development of tools. The other two things that I think are really important is in the area of digital repository development. Although I think we have to really do much more to address the problem of digital curation in the wild. Those are digital objects that aren't actually ingested into a repository, but are sitting in the bottom of the desk drawers across universities. We need to curate those better. We need to find ways to manage them. The development of the repository is really important. And the recognition that if you build repositories, the technical aspect of it is a very small part, the other processes and the frameworks that you actually use are as much are significant, if not more significant, than the technical aspects, and the growth of the notion of audit of these repositories, whether it's risk management, which are on board that we developed here at Glasgow, or TRACK, which was developed by David Girard and his distributed sort of way. These mechanisms for auditing and supporting repositories. And the last thing is the diversity of community engagement. When we first started out, there was just some librarians, a few archivists, and a small number of folks with a little technical edge, and that was it. Now we've got a much more diverse group of people involved, and that's really important.
I would agree with just everything you said there, Seamus, and maybe taking it back to your shoebox, you know, or the box of delights from Charles Dollar. The community has grown, and that itself, I think, is a success, because the brain power that has brought to the question, the attention that's brought to the question is important. And I think, thinking about how the community has grown, it's also worth observing, as you've done, that the community has grown, but it's not been colonised by one particular discipline or one particular profession, and that's really important. Because my fear, a few years ago, it was quite fashionable to talk about a new profession of digital preservation or curation coming along, and that may or may not be a good thing, but my fear about such an idea is that it starts to institutionalise. And as soon as it starts to institutionalise, it begins to lose some of the flexibility, which actually has been the greatest asset, I think, to some of the problem solving through time. Kind of thinking about some of the institutions that have evolved or developed through that time, I think is useful too. I'm impressed now, and it's only a fairly recent development really, that there is a growing economy of some quite small to medium enterprises who are now selling digital preservation. Well, not selling digital preservation, they're selling components of a digital preservation supply chain, which effectively anyone can get access to. I'm thinking of, to some extent, organisations like Archivum, or Preservica, or Archivomatica, and there are different solutions, and they also offer different things, but there's also different sectors. I'm impressed what's been achieved in the publishing industry. I mean, we can argue about the details of protocol, for example, or clocks and the different approaches, but they have, I think, very successfully inserted themselves into an entire industry where the value of the data has never been in question. The only question has been how do we sustain that. A second series of areas or a group of technologies which I think have been a success have been around web archiving. It seems to me that although there are problems, and I'm not pretending it's complete, there is a momentum behind web archiving, both at a policy and institutional level. I argue the legislation is problematic, but there is the technology to do it, and the technology has outstripped really the institutional capacity to deliver it. But tools like Memento, I think, are actually in some ways genius, because they break down the division between an archive and the live web. And that focus on use, I think, is a real transformative component of what's on offer. I think we should stop for a moment in the development of the institutional repository. Absolutely agree. I think we should stop for a moment and tip our caps to the research councils and their mandates, which have forced the issue at a senior management level. So it's finally being addressed both from the people who know that it's a problem, and the senior managers and the executives have to make the decisions and make the investments on that. I think higher education is way ahead, actually, and it probably might not feel that, those of you working in institutional repositories in higher education, but it's way ahead of other sectors, and that's, I think, because of the policy drivers, for example, from the research councils, although not uniquely. So there are some real successes, I think, both at a technology organisation level and in terms of the people. I think I'll come back to that observation. My first real encounter with the digital preservation community as such was a conference in New York in about 2003, the Cedars conference. You gave a paper there, Seamus, which was the Road to Wigan Pier or such. I forget momentarily the name of the paper. You know the one I mean. Changing Trains at Wigan, that was it. And it was about 50 people. That was the worldwide digital preservation community, all in one
room not much larger than this, and actually that's been transformed. The idea of having just this number of people in a room to discuss it 10 years ago was somewhat absurd, and that's, I think, been our biggest success.